I'm pretty excited. Thank you. I'm excited for this session. I don't know how many of you know Alex Richardson well, but he has done a unbelievably tremendous job just developing and building the National High School Ethics Bowl. And we wanted to make sure that we brought part of the discussion of the National High School Bowl into the workshop, because it's not the IEB workshop, it's the Ethics Bowl workshop. But we're going to talk a little bit about the pipeline from the high school bowl into the IEB and beyond today. And Alex is going to start a little bit with just giving you a little bit of overview of some of the statistics of what's going on at the high school bowl and how that creates a pretty great opportunity for the Intercollegiate Ethics Bowl. So yay, and welcome, Alex.
Thanks, John. Thanks. This is super exciting. I'm glad to be here.
Uh-oh.
So what? Define uh-oh. Can you hear me? It's you, John. Everyone else can hear me. Sorry. So as John mentioned, I'm Alex Richardson. I'm based at the Parr Center at UNC Chapel Hill. We're the home and headquarters of the National High School Ethics Bowl, which was founded some time ago. We're nearing our 10th anniversary this coming year, based, of course, on APPE IEB, which has been around a good deal longer. You know, we still have a nice kind of older younger brother kind of relationship. So it's really good to be here with you and to celebrate that. And I was also recently elected to the APPE board of directors, so I'm really excited to have that new venue for kind of advocating for this activity that I think we all know and love by virtue of the fact that we're here on Zoom on a beautiful Saturday. So as John mentioned, I want to tell you a little bit about how the High School Ethics Bowl has grown, and in particular kind of develop, if I can, a little bit of a cross section of what the average National High School Ethics Bowl participant looks like, because that is the future of IEB. One of the most common problems that coaches and organizers are looking to solve is what happens when my seniors graduate? What happens when my reliable team contributors are no longer available? And I'm stuck with brand new students who've just come to campus who may or may not know anything about Ethics Bowl in general. So what I hope to paint a picture of for you today is that we have roughly around 1,000 students that we're about to send out into the world, universities around the country this year, which I hope, will be on your teams and participating in your programs later this fall. But I also, you know, we've just collected some data on our students really comprehensively for the first time. We're just now getting to the point where we're able to collect sufficient sample sizes, I think, for the data to be useful. So I want to tell you a little bit about High School Ethics Bowl participants and talk together and brainstorm about how we can turn those students into APPE IEB, and we hope lifelong Ethics Bowl students. And as I'll show you in a few minutes, it's now meaningfully possible to get the kind of Ethics Bowl style learning and engagement from the time you're very young to the time really that you retire. So this is an increasingly a lifelong activity, and we want to make sure that we're sort of keeping folks consistently engaged in the thing that we know and love. So I'm going to share some slides really quick. It's easier to talk about numbers if you can see them. So can you just verify for me? Everybody can see what I see? Fabulous. Thank you. As I mentioned, we want to kind of develop this target audience for APPE IEB recruiting. We want to catch these students as they come to your campuses, perhaps even before. So just a little bit of overview here on the scale of the students that we're talking about. So as I mentioned before, the National High School Ethics Bowl is based on APPE IEB. I'm putting our mission statement up here, but I will not waste your time by reading it. Surprisingly, perhaps not surprisingly, the mission statements are almost identical. They overlap pretty significantly. We are doing, you know, some things in slightly different methodological ways. Our case design process is a little bit different, of course, because there are sort of developmental differences between, at least in some cases, your youngest high school students and your older university students, though their behaviors don't always exactly match that. At least based on some of the stories that I heard yesterday. Suffice it to say that our organizations overlap on much, and you know what follows will be an invitation for our organizations to overlap on membership and engagement. You know, as I mentioned, the National High School Ethics Bowl is about 10 years old. We were founded in 2012. That year, I think we took on students from 10 or 11 states. There were around 1,000 students. This year, our picture looks a little bit different. So this past year, we grew to 42 regional competitions across 32 states. We took in around 450 teams of students, and all told, we're sitting just under 4,000 students consistently participating in our program year over year around the country. And again, that's across 32 states. So there's a good opportunity here, right? And I want to start thinking a little bit about who these students are, what kind of demographics they have, because I think this is a good, like, getting some clear data on this and deciding what to do with it and how to operationalize it is a good gesture, not only toward the kind of obvious existential future of the APPE IEB, but to some of the diversification and inclusion priorities that we discussed some yesterday. So of the students that participate in our program, a majority of them are public. It's about 67%. But we're also lucky, and I mean, part of it's luck, part of it is that, you know, we've increasingly designed the program with as low barriers to entry as possible. This has been uniquely kind of an interesting field to work in during the pandemic, because we've been able to reduce things like travel burdens, right? And obviously, something is lost when we do competitions virtually, but we've been able to capitalize on that for, you know, sort of equity reasons, right? Many schools really do have the trouble fundraising for the purposes of traveling, not only to their regional competition, but ultimately to the national one as well. So we've had a lot of promising inroads with students who, you know, may not otherwise have as much access to the program as we would want them to. So a good percentage of our schools, you know, have large minority populations, have lower socioeconomic status students, and we do fairly demographically well too. You know, this is an outgrowth. This activity is an outgrowth of the discipline of philosophy, which is not always, or perhaps not ever, the most diverse entity in the world. But the High School Ethics Bowl, thankfully, looks a little bit more like the population than the average philosophy department. So 63% of our students are women, and 27% of them are non-white. So we're sort of, we have work to do to make sure that the Ethics Bowl activity is comprehensively available to everyone, but we are sort of starting to think about and do that work, and that's something that I'm happy to think about together as we think about, you know, how to turn high school Ethics Bowl students into collegiate Ethics Bowl students. And this won't surprise you either, but our students tell us lots about the skills that they gain from the Ethics Bowl program. I won't go through all of these. Suffice it to say that they think they're getting something out of this that they don't get elsewhere. But the number I want to call your attention to is this one, which is that a clear majority, 82% of our students, agree that because of their participation in the High School Ethics Bowl, because of their exposure to this new way of thinking and talking, and we hope working together, they're more likely to do something like go to a university, study philosophy, and or study ethics, whether that be in coursework or whether that be in terms of looking for an extracurricular like the IEB. So I want to, you know, rather than me talking about what students think of participating in Ethics Bowl, it's perhaps best to hear from them. And, you know, in lieu of having a student here with me to share a little bit, I've taken this testimonial from a focus group that we did last fall. This student is an alumnus of the Virginia High School Ethics Bowl, ended up at Stanford, and credits the High School Ethics Bowl with changing a good deal of the way that he thought about his college experience. So this is the kind of student that the APPE IEB coach wants to find in their first weeks.
I'm coming out of like a semester of having studied ethics 5 hours a week, and one of the things I noticed, like, even though I wasn't in this class, there has never been an experience or a greater tool that has made me believe not only that I can be a better person, but that I can challenge the world to be better, and that there is that possibility. And one of the things I would say is, like, this experience will just change the way that you view the world, the way you view individual interactions in a way that nothing else in my life ever had before. Because there's so many things to get lost in, like, the politics and the negative side of the world, but this gives you a genuine platform to challenge the world to be better. And I think that's something that's really special.
So what coach doesn't want this precocious student on their ethics bowl team, right? So this is the profile of student we're looking for. The student who had a good experience in the high school ethics bowl, wants to continue doing it, and will soon be a regular fixture on your campuses. So I want to talk a little bit about that subset of students that's super interested in ethics bowl and talking about it in this way. Something that's a little bit of a boogeyman for us is actually a really good recruiting opportunity for APPE IEB, and that is that a good portion of that 3,800 students roughly will graduate high school in the next couple years. So nearly 40% of our students are going to be coming out of high school in the next couple years, and of those, 98% of them are going to go to a college or university, right? So like they're coming to you. And we have some preliminary data. I've just broken it down, in very broad geographic categories, but we have some preliminary data too, which we'll be sharing with APPE in the coming months, about where those students are going to go to school. So one of the things that I want us to think together about is how not only APPE IEB sort of centrally, but coaches and regional organizers can leverage this data about who these students are, where these students are, to get them in your classrooms and onto your teams. But importantly, like, these students actually want to hear from you too, right? So 64% of those students who are about to graduate indicate some interest in participating, right? And those are just the ones who marked the survey, right? There are very few students who wouldn't likely welcome more ethics bowl if properly sort of coaxed, right? So it's a really big recruiting opportunity. So we estimate that just south of 1,000 students are about to be on your campuses within the next few months, ready and willing to supplement your existing teams, or to come to you, to come to other faculty members, to band together with other students and to start teams in places where they don't exist. So one of the other things we'll be talking about in this session, I think John has some things to say about that sort of recruiting as well, right? Like, how do we actually capitalize on these students when they sort of get to campus? So, not only do we want to think about the recruiting pipeline that exists between the high school ethics bowl and the collegiate ethics bowl, this is part of a greater aspiration that my colleagues at APPE and my colleagues at the PAR Center have been sort of kicking back and forth for a very long time, and that is something that will likely land on sympathetic ears in this crowd. And that is the idea that ethics bowl is quite a bit more than an event that you go to one weekend. A lot of it's good, a lot of its learning happens long before the students step through the doors. And that's something we want to take really seriously when we're thinking about its kind of pedagogical design, its programmatic design, right? What students are getting out of it, what the core values are. That's where we started this weekend together, having a really clear and I think useful conversation about those norms. But increasingly, like, we want this type of activity, right? This type of citizenship building, this type of ethical reflection to happen for students across their lifespan, right? In no period of life is the sort of self-regarding task of reflecting on and contextualizing, maybe even revising your values bad. And in no sort of stage of life is sort of being more civically engaged, particularly now, right? Being able to, not only speak to, but in fact, productively work with people who disagree with you about the fundamentals, right? That's something that, we want children to be able to think about through adults, right? So increasingly there are opportunities for students to do that. And I want to be clear that, our sort of recruiting pipeline that we're talking about today isn't the only opportunity available. It's now realistically possible for many students across the country to be engaged with this, again, from the time that they're 5 or 6 years old, by participating in philosophy for children programs around the country. So the PAR Center is doing some of these. The Prindle Institute, where I'm sitting, this background is actually not fake, believe it or not. This is a real building that these people come to work in every day. So good on them. Those institutions and many others have really fantastic philosophy for children programs. There's a burgeoning middle school ethics bowl movement. There is, of course, the National High School Ethics Bowl, and the thing that you all participate in, or hopefully soon will, the Intercollegiate Ethics Bowl. And increasingly, based on some efforts, both from us at the PAR Center and from APPE, there are plenty of opportunities emerging for students to continue doing ethics bowl as adults. So APPE is working on a corporate ethics bowl pilot that will allow students to sort of take this into their workplaces as they graduate. And we've been working on some things at the PAR Center, particularly with some of the partners we've listed here. The Orange County Department on Aging, the City of Durham. So we're doing things ranging from using Ethics Bowl as a way to bring a little life and energy to, corporate compliance training and ethics training, to a way to engage elders that society often forgets about. So, we want to think about Ethics Bowl, and I guess this is all to say that the spirit of this session is to think about Ethics Bowl as this sort of deeply portable enterprise, right? That students can take with them, again, from the time that they're very young to the time that they're late in their lives. So there are plenty of places for alumni at all levels to plug into this, not just between high school and college, but after college, early on in life, and of course, as they enter the workforce and even as they leave the workforce. So from there, I kind of want to let John switch gears and start facilitating conversation, not only about some of these numbers and some of this population that we want to capitalize on, but some of the more kind of general outreach tasks around building this pipeline that we hope and joke is kind of from cradle to grave. So we want students to have access to that. So I'll hand it back to John.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. We were talking a bunch of us were talking the other day about, we always have conversations about how to grow the Ethics Bowl. And my joke was, well, we'll just keep letting Alex do all the work, and then we'll just benefit from the pipeline that he's creating. But of course, that's a joke, and there needs to be a lot of intentionality in terms of making sure we capture these students and then sort of returning the favor, so to speak, in terms of making sure that students who come out of the high school ethics bowl maybe go back to the high school ethics bowl as moderators and judges and helping out. But then the other part of the conversation I'd love to have today is the other end of the pipeline after the intercollegiate ethics bowl, is making sure we're hanging on to our alumni. Yeah, that's right, joke and in air quotes. But before we start into that conversation a little bit, I noticed we've got a couple new students here today, in addition to some of the students that were here yesterday. So I would love, and I think many of them were high school bowl students who went on to start the University of Chicago Ethics Bowl team, and then were very, very, very successful. So I'd love for you all to introduce yourselves. So I think I saw Jenna and Gabriel. I'm not sure who else from the team is here, but go ahead and say hi and tell us a little bit, if you will, about your experience in the high school bowl and coming into the college bowl.
I can start us off very quickly. So hi, I'm Jenna. I'm a rising fourth year at the University of Chicago. I'm double majoring in philosophy, and Chicago has like an interdisciplinary major called Law, Letters, and Society. And let me just call them out, Gabe, Watson, Matt, and Holden. We were all part of the Chicago Ethics Bowl team. It was our first year as like an officially recognized student organization last year, and then we went to nationals in our first year as an officially recognized organization. So we have some insight on that process. But maybe a little bit briefly about like high school ethics bowl too, because Gabe and I actually both did high school ethics bowl at different schools, but then we came into college actually because we had high school experience. So having that high school experience for me at least was like super integral to like being aware that ethics bowl can be a thing for college students, let alone like any students. So that was a huge, like doing it in high school is a very formative part. And then maybe a little bit about the starting it at a college like experience, and then Gabe and Watson, Matt, and Holden can also share something about this, is that like it does take a lot of persistence, and I think it depends a lot on I guess like the type of institution that you're at. So at the University of Chicago, all of our clubs are student run. So we didn't really have like the infrastructure of like some schools are able to get it to be an official organization because it can be recognized as a class that gets credit. So I think it takes a lot of initiative on students, and for our school in particular, because it's student run, they kind of want, before student run organizations get officially recognized by the university, they want there to be some kind of credibility already to that organization's name. So what we did leading up to getting official recognition and then doing things like, getting second in Nats and like things like that, was to basically try to get to our first regional without official recognition. So that meant like starting our own team to the schools. We reached out to faculty members in the philosophy department to help sponsor us. And then we got like financial sponsorship through the philosophy department. So I guess like advice in that kind of way is that if you're faculty members and you want to start a student run organization or have students get interested, would be to, I guess, one, secure funding. So hopefully if you're in a department that's able to like, like fund some of that, that'd be very helpful. And then two, I think just advertising to your student body, reaching out to your students, I think either in class or through list hosts, because we found that like a lot of students are very interested in this, as Alex was saying. It's just a matter of like having them get to know it. So I think if you can secure funding and secure like awareness through your student body, then you're set to like start your own ethics bowl.
Great, so much, Jenna. Thank you. Gabe, Watson, and Matthew, I was just typing in the chat. We're almost about halfway through, so I hope you don't take offense if I don't have you all sort of talk about your experience in the same depth. But if maybe one more of you wants to talk a little bit, that'd be great. And then I just want to sort of get some questions out there to the group in terms of how we can carry some of this pipeline forward.
Yeah, I can just kind of corroborate everything Jenna said. The one thing else as Jenna said, I was also in the high school ethics bowl. So, I mean, I got super interested in it through that pipeline as well. And I'm really excited to hear that so many more students are increasing that way. The other thing I will say is that we actually got some support too from APPE, John in particular, who was able to send us a letter at the very beginning and got that sort of institutional support for getting our organization started. So that kind of a connection was actually very, very, very important in getting our club started and getting us where we did. But the other thing, pretty much everyone who's done ethics up to this point has found it to be an incredible, enriching experience. And very formative, even if whatever kind of career they go on to pursue after. In my case, I just kind of fell in love with ethics as a whole, but other people go into medical school also very much, or law school, appreciate the experience like very deeply. So it's something that all students from all backgrounds really benefit from.
That's great. And Gabe, I noticed in your name that you're also a U Chicago alum. So you're kind of representing both sides of this pipeline for us in terms of making sure that we keep you involved now that you're done with your college experience. So I really want this to be conversational and in a sense, make our problem everyone's problem in terms of making sure that we're sort of deliberate and intentional by keeping these students in the fold. One of the things that Alex was talking about when he was showing those statistics is the high school bowl. Many of their students have indicated this is where I am likely to go to college. So we actually know, oh, we can find out these students are going to these places. Do these places have college, ethics bowl teams? If not, we can start to think about, okay, how do we help them make connections to do what Gabe and Jenna and the rest of the students did and get a team started? Or if so, one of the sort of tragedy is too strong a word, right? But it's unfortunate when you have these students who did ethics bowl in high school and then kind of don't carry it over. There's an existing team, but they just never connect. The students coming out of high school don't connect with the existing students. Maybe it's because it's being run by a philosophy department and they were involved through the extracurriculars and they just never connect, whatever. So I want to just ask everybody your thoughts about, very nuts and bolts ideas for trying to make sure that we're capturing these high school students and then reconnecting them back into the high school bowl to build those partnerships that are two-way partnerships. So I'll just throw it open. Megan, go ahead. Sure.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. I have two questions. One is for Alex about the information where high school bowls are located, right? Because so I'm in Iowa, and so I'm thinking I'd like to reach out to those high schools in Iowa, right, or the surrounding area. And then my other question is for Jenna and the other students. My colleague and I, Genevieve, who's here as well, we're in the process of starting a team, and I've been teaching ethics bowl in like doing a mini bowl, right, in my ethics courses for the past 2 years, and really trying to get students interested, right? And I'm wondering what you found most effective, right, in reaching out to your peers and getting them excited.
I can just quickly take the question about locations. So in Iowa in particular, our closest regional will be at Iowa State in Ames. But I'm going to drop, and just in case anyone else has this question as well, I'm going to drop a link to our full listing of regionals in the chat. So there's a map there at the top of the page that's kind of interactive that you can overlay stuff onto and see where our respective events are. And start mapping out schools in the area. One of the projects that John and I were just talking about this morning, one of the projects that my organization and APPE are going to be working on in the future is actually creating interactive maps that associate the locations of high school ethics bowl regionals with existing IEB teams, right, to sort of build some geographic connections there. And then there's also, of course, if you do want to reach out, the contact information for all of our local regional organizers there. But I'll hand off to the students for what I think is the more interesting question.
Yeah, I can take that question very briefly and then pass it on to my other team members to see what they think. But I think that's like one of the toughest problems is that, like, how do you get kids excited for this thing, and like how do you spread awareness? And I can offer you from the student perspective, like we had the exact same problem that you as like a faculty member would have. It's like, how do you get people to even know about this thing? And I think there are like multiple ways that you can market an ethics bowl. I think one, like how we started our team, like I think our team kind of had like three, like I would say like, yeah, I think there are like 3 major stages. There's like the first stage is kind of just like talking to our friends. Actually, a lot of us here, so Holden, Gabe, and Watson, we were all part of like kind of like the inaugural unofficial team. And that really just came out of like, I just asked my friends. I asked Gabe asked his roommate who was Holden. I asked my friend who was Watson. And then we just kind of formed that very informal team. So I think that's important in the first step of like having, and this is what I was talking about earlier, about having some kind of credibility. Like it's really hard to explain what ethics bowl is to people who like have no idea what it is without them like kind of seeing it and like seeing examples of it. And like having people who have already competed can even, they can speak for themselves too about what that experience is like what even is an ethics bowl. So I think first and foremost, like if you want to start just like a team, like it only takes like a minimum of 3 students for like intercollegiate and like a maximum, I think, of like 7 now. So if you can just get 3 people interested, which I don't think it'd be very hard because ethics bowl is like very fascinating, then you just get them on board and kind of like train with them. So that's like the first step in creating that kind of ragtag team, is just like knowing some people. And then I think in terms of getting it known to a larger audience, like more students, it really helps if you teach ethics classes, which you said you did, Megan. So that's actually super, super helpful. It's like, you can email your list host, you can mention it in your class. Depending on the type of school, maybe, I don't know how this works institutionally, but like I know like some schools offer like credit for it. That might be a way of like incentivizing students to like get on board with it. I think if you have any student fairs, like we were able to really, really grow our team. And actually that's how we got Matt on board, was through like student organization fairs. So like our school calls them RSO fairs. They happen like the beginning of every quarter of every semester, just like getting that kind of advertising out. Emailing philosophy list hosts, I think sociology, public policy list hosts, like just it really is like a marketing thing. And then from there you can have them refer to you, and then you can just like go ahead and start training them. So I think that's 2 parts. Like one, creating that initial team to begin with to get some legitimacy and like recognition from your institution. And then 2 is just like emailing people, telling your students about it, tell them to tell their friends about it. may even want to ask if any of your students like have ethics bowl experience. So like, I think it's like surprising kids that do and then kids that don't. But yeah, those are just some initial thoughts. And I think Watson also had some ideas about like, how do you get people excited for this thing?
And I'm going to get to Watson and Genevieve here in one sec. I just want to catch us up a little bit on the chat, especially because people getting the recording aren't going to see all this chat coming up. But Mark had an interesting comment, I think, in the chat about connecting non-APPE IEB schools to the local high school, which is sort of has this double impact, right? So you're getting, you know, you don't necessarily have a team at the college level, but you could still get involvement at the high school level. And then that is going to generate interest to then start the college team. So it has that nice effect. And then I know there was some back and forth about resources and about social media presence and data on, what was the data? Whether students are choosing their colleges based on ethics bowl teams. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll capture some of these websites that Alex has been putting up and posting, and we'll include that in the post-workshop email so that that's not getting lost. So I hope that's a little bit of a recap of the chat. And then go ahead, Genevieve, and then Watson. Or Watson, you had your hand up and then it went down. Are you? Should I get you first? Go ahead. Yeah.
Also be speaking. Of course, Genevieve will go before me.
Okay, Genevieve and then Watson. Yeah. And sorry, Holden, I didn't mention you earlier. Sorry.
Yeah. And I just had a slightly sort of, you know, we're talking about gaining student interest, you know, inside the college, right, internally. And I was just sort of wondering about the success anyone had, because one of the things we want, again, in starting our ethics bowl team, is we wanted to also use it as a recruitment tool for students, you know, bringing students to campus as well. So to sort of work with marketing. And I just didn't know if anybody had any ideas or success with marketing schools, you know, as you're trying to get high school students to come to whatever college it is, right? To use Ethics Bowl as sort of a way in which to encourage students to come to the college. If anybody had had any success in that.
It's an interest. Alex, you look like you were going to answer that. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, so I can't answer this for campuses, but I mean, one of the things that it occurs to me now that NHSEB and APPE IEB can do together is develop some of this material. So NHSEB, we haven't released them yet, but we've started developing advocacy kits for high schools who are looking to start new programs and new teams, right? It not only puts them in touch with their local organizers, but it also gives them data for administrators based on, you know, like likelihood that ethics bowl students, you know, the academic benefits they get from it. It packages testimonials for them. It includes things like recruiting posters and social media posts for them to market directly to students. And to sort of, you know, in many cases, as is the case with, you know, overworked and overburdened public school teachers, they have to justify the very existence of something extra. Right. So in that same headspace, right, you know, the idea of marketing directly to students on their campuses, right, producing some materials, you know, sort of in conjunction between the two organizations that sort of, you know, identify and celebrate the activities, values, draw students in, and then of course, you know, IEB centrally providing those to campuses. Yeah. That seems like a really good use of both organizations' energy. So that's definitely something we should add to our docket, John.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And then where did Watson go? I saw him a second ago.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, go ahead.
Probably should have kept my. Yeah, I probably should have kept my hand up. I should make clear that I was not a part of any pipeline. Jenna had recruited me, and she was quite persistent. So sometimes there is no doubt that element of persistence as well as charisma that draws in people who otherwise might not be interested. And of course, my initial thought, and it was the initial thought of many people I came across as I was doing my own sort of informal recruiting, was that Ethics Bowl was exclusionary to everybody else. I mean, certainly somebody who wasn't interested in philosophy would feel as though they didn't exactly have a place within Ethics Bowl. So of course, I've found talking about the contents of specific cases to draw in students from particular academic fields and spaces actually rather effective. So of course, if I was talking to an econ bro, I could definitely bring up the cryptocurrency case or a sociology major, perhaps anything having to do with Black Lives Matter or any of the social activist seeming cases. if I was talking to a STEM, perhaps a bio major, I could very well bring up CRISPR. Of course, it was quite helpful to even discuss this. I'm remembering a time in which my psychology major friend, he stated, "Oh, I think I can do this." When of course I was just explaining how it worked down to the fundamentals, that it wasn't merely a sort of fetishistic activity in talking philosophy. Not having to bring up anything specifically theory oriented certainly drew him in, and certainly drew in other people. I would say, not that I'm one for planning, but in addition to trying to do some basic reorientation vis-a-vis marketing to other students, having students be able to see, perhaps with a team of people coming from one place to another, how an actual round goes, to see that it is in fact quite friendly and quite opening. One of our draws was to differentiate ourselves from all of the other RSOs at our school. So moot court, Model UN, debate, because those are where, and perhaps this was a bit mean of me, those are where the sharks reside. And we are not sharks. In fact, we're quite nice and quite welcoming. I find that many students, even if they're not interested in philosophy, they might get drawn in by the fact that we don't try to spill any blood, which is quite cool. So being able to at least model what exactly goes down within a particular round would actually be really helpful for drawing students in. So I thought I might be able to state that. And on the very last point, I want to at least stress that I'm a sociology major. And you know, there's a valid critique about persistent amorality that comes to sociology. But I found that honestly, the team that we had competed against, we had to solve imperialism in that particular round. I found that none of them were actually philosophy majors or people involved in philosophy. I found it just by getting new blood, perhaps we don't want to displace the philosophical thinking that comes with ethics bowl, absolutely not. But by getting new blood, we can definitely get new orientations that help to make rounds definitely in of themselves more exciting. Because you know, it's nice hearing about Kant, but perhaps some bell hooks wouldn't hurt anybody. Definitely, especially when we're talking about political philosophy and making contact with reality, certainly helps people to think that ethics and philosophy more broadly is not some abstract thing, that it has material consequences. So that's all I wanted to say.
Great. Thank you, Watson. And it's a bunch of comments in the chat just about a lot of the great points that you made about ways that the high schools could reach out to the colleges and vice versa. So that I really appreciate your thoughts there. Go ahead, Mark.
Just two quick points. One is for those of us who are faculty on the college level or college students, is to go to the admissions office and talk to them about the Ethics Bowl. And talk to them about the increasing number of students who are, and tell them about the spirit of the Ethics Bowl and their own experience, and that they ought to have their antenna up for students who are active in the Ethics Bowl. And then we ought to advise high school students that they should talk about that experience in their essays. It's just in my mind, it's a no-brainer. It's the kind of thing I've done a lot of work in recruiting for Villanova, and so I work with admissions people. The Ethics Bowl experience is the kind of stuff that, at least that in my institution, but I don't think we're that unique, is the kind of stuff that they eat up because it shows an intellectually engaged, public-minded individual. The other point I wanted to make is something that just is starting this year at my university is I got approached, I'm the administrator of the ethics program at my university, and I got approached by the people in charge of orientation for first-year students. They are creating a booklet that we got an opportunity to purchase an ad to advertise our events. One of the things I'm sure the students will recognize is that if you don't get students in their first year, they are so involved by spring of their first year that they don't have space. Even if they want to do it, they just don't, they don't want to give up other things because they've already made friends. Do you know what I mean? So if you put it in front of them immediately, especially those who don't know anything about Ethics Bowl, with a creative marketing ad, at least that's what we're going to do. And there might be similar publications at other universities.
Great. Thank you, Mark. I didn't realize I was unmuted, so you heard my clicky clack as I was trying to type something into the chat. And when I was typing, it's just that we're going to run out of time here in a second. So the other part of the discussion that we wanted to have today was really about building the alumni structure so that there's some real intentionality of keeping people in the fold after their time at the IEB. So we'll add that to our list of possible discussion topics for the open forum section. One note about the open forum session, I think, Richard, I should talk with you and Rachel about this, but it seems to me that we could set that up so that people could, you know, wander in and then wander into a different discussion kind of thing. So it's not, you don't have to feel like you're committing to only one topic at 3 o'clock. But yeah, this has been really great and helpful. And I think especially, you know, Genevieve's point and Watson's point, a couple of good concrete ways that we can start to make these connections firmer. So thank you very much for participating. We have 2 minutes. So any thoughts from anyone that hasn't had a chance to share? Any questions or thoughts people want to offer before we close it down? I don't want to get yelled at for not having a break between our next session. So yeah, Watson.
We discovered incredible interest actually in Ethics Bowl after doing one of those RSO fairs, as in we got a lot of names down and emails. And I was thinking, if this were ever to come to pass for any of you all, right, there is just an influx of students. Maybe there's got to be a way within our internal structures to have people who may not necessarily want to compete, still of course be able to contribute to conversations or perhaps do training, mentoring, coming up with different ways to segment some of the semi or fully official positions that people could take up. If it is the case that students feel as though they're not exactly needed because they're not exactly included within the competing itself, you can lose people. And when we're thinking about retention of students, we might want to diversify the positions that we might have within leadership structures and the roles that individual students can take up, because, you know, retention is really important. Yes.
It's great. Yeah, Genevieve?
Yeah, I just had a real quick point, and just something, if anyone's looking, you know, for admissions, I had spoken to one of our admissions directors about the Ethics Bowl and was describing it to them and using sort of Watson's language of, you know, this isn't a shark, right? It's not blood in the water and people aren't going at each other. And one of our admissions directors said this might be amazing as a draw for students who have fairly conservative views, who feel less comfortable speaking in a class if they don't feel like others share their view, which we often have we have small seminar style classes. And oftentimes they don't feel comfortable, but this would be a format where their perspective would be heard, would be respectfully addressed, right? And so it's just, you know, as we have these tensions with our students, as we see in the political realm, I think Ethics Bowl is an amazing tool to bring students from diverse perspectives together to really talk about things. So just wanted to throw that out there. The admissions director sort of saw that.
That's a great point. And as we close out here, I'll just add a quick plug for the next session. The next session is about building connections between teams, but we're talking earlier this morning. I think we're also going to try to include a little bit of building connections across campus, like within your own campus, you know, expanding it. A lot of times what we have, right, is an Ethics Bowl coach teaches their ethics class and they recruit their students and it becomes very isolated to one person. And the Jenna and Watson and the students that have spoken have really done a really great job speaking to the fact that like that really is limiting ourselves in a way that we don't need to, that it is something that can be very across the curriculum. And so we'll talk a little bit about some of that as well coming up in 15 minutes. So we hope you will come back in 15 minutes. But thanks everyone for coming back this morning, and we'll see you shortly. And thanks to Alex and all the students who spoke up and everyone.